All right, everyone. Welcome once again. It is Friday, and it is the Manufacturing E-commerce Success. I'm one of your hosts, Damon Pistolka, and that pretty guy right over there is Curt Anderson. We're going to be discussing maximizing opportunities with your supply chain today. Curt, take it away, my friend.
Damon, you handsome devil. How about this guy over here? So, exit your way, exit and growth strategy specialist. And he's been, doesn't he look refreshed? He just, has been on vacation, enjoying family time. Man, you just look more handsome than ever, Damon. So happy Friday to you.
That's a scary
I am so honored and privileged to introduce our guest today. None other, I don't know if she even needs an introduction, but Anna McGovern. Happy Friday. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Curt, great to be here with you. Damon, you guys are the best. Keep doing what you're doing. Love and honored to be here.
Oh, absolutely. So you have a laundry list. So first off, guys, you need to connect with Anna here on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. She has just, we're going to take a deep dive into her background, her superpowers. But Anna, you know what? I want to kick things off with a little question before we dig deep, so we have a lot to cover. And you are the supply chain evangelist. Boy, the guru. So we have a ton to cover. And I think, Damon, I don't know about you. Have there been some supply chain challenges the past couple of years? I think
someone said something about it.
Too soon. Too soon. I know, but we'll dig into that. And here's our first question. If we kick things off today, young girl growing up in Connecticut. Do I have that correctly? Did you grow up in Connecticut? So as a young girl growing up, who was your hero? Who was your hero growing up in the great state of Connecticut?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's interesting. The easy answer is, my mother and my father both were immigrants, but you know who my hero was? Ella Grasso. Ella Grasso was the governor of the state of Connecticut, and she was the first female governor in the country. And she was, this Italian girl who made it big. And she actually introduced, the nickel deposit on all the bottles and the whole concept of recycling. This is back in the late 70s and 80s. But I just was so in awe of the fact that she made it. And I was like, what does that say for all these little girls, who want to be president of the United States and stuff like that? And I can't believe, to this day, we still don't have a female president. But anyway, I like Ella Grasso. May she rest in peace.
Well, man, what a fantastic choice. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, mom and dad being immigrants, I think you just shared. So that is, so a lot of inspiration, and it's kind of leading up to your background. So founder, managing director of Pondview, you have an illustrious, wonderful career, heavy duty corporate, Fortune 500. We're going to talk about that. I believe I saw that you were the Bronx Food Bank, so we're going to talk about that. So let's, as you came out of college, and I think that, were you an adjunct at your alma mater too? Did I see that?
Yeah. I taught, believe it or not, I taught supply chain to MBA students.
Wow. Okay.
That was a great job.
Okay. Let's kick things off. So you have your bachelor's, your master's degree, and you decide to bring your superpowers into supply chain as a young woman. You just mentioned governor of Connecticut was a great inspiration to you. What attracted you? What brought your talent, your skills, your passion into the supply chain world?
Well, most people, I should have a better answer for this, but really the truth of the matter is, and let me be truthful and very upfront, I kind of fell into supply chain, right? I kind of fell into supply chain. Right. My undergrad was in psychology. Right. I've got a minor in philosophy. And as I start digging into my employability coming out of college, I was like, man, I need to add a little backup plan here. So I started taking a bunch of marketing classes. And really it was the realization that I've got all these student loans. I was the first person to go away to college, right, in my family. So I was like, money is factoring in here. I better do something. And I got hired for, at the time, $26,000 a year. And that was way better than most of my classmates. And I was doing customer service, for a bit. So that was like the first entry level. And I was doing it for a manufacturer that made the competitive product to plexiglass. Right. So we made something called polycast. And then from there, I went into manufacturing. I was doing materials planning for the factory, and I became a purchasing manager. And honestly, it was all about fixing things. It was all about solving problems. And that is something that came naturally to me. It was a role that I had to inherit very early on, like as a teeny weeny child, oldest child, always having to fix things, always having to sort things out. And I enjoyed it. And, from there, it kind of one thing led to another. I got recruited by the old Lever Brothers, which is a Unilever company. And then I hit the big time. I was on Park Avenue in Manhattan. I took my parents in to show them that their daughter had arrived. I was like, look where I'm going to be working, across from the Waldorf Astoria.
Wow.
And then I spent the next 23 years working for Unilever. And then, I went into a PE-backed business in the beauty industry. And then I went into nonprofit. And then I went into my own firm. So that's really kind of the nickel tour of how things, started, the supply chain path. And, I love supply chain because really it's about problems and then finding solutions. And that's kind of one of my superpowers.
That is awesome. Now, and if I'm not mistaken, at Unilever, did I happen to see like hair care products? Do you have experience with hair care products?
Oh my gosh, yes.
So maybe offline, could you give me some tips or some advice, or just anyway? We'll take that conversation offline.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just kidding, Damon. I don't know. Are you guys sitting down for this, Damon? Are you? And I'm all right. Get back and just. Damon, sit back and just get comfortable for a second, okay? This is going to take me a few minutes, okay? You want to hear about our friend Anna? Okay. First off, if you're out there, drop us a note. Let us know that you're out there. If you have any questions about supply chain, great. We have the evangelist. We have the guru. You want to check this out. You want to connect with Anna. But all right, let me just share a couple of things. Her level of leadership to ensure projects were done on time were second to none. Results-driven leader, passionate leader, highly passionate, effective manager, dedicated, smart, energetic, creative, continually drives value creation for Unilever. Anna can do things in supply chain that are superhuman and sustainable. Anna is the consummate professional who works tirelessly with every endeavor. Her style, get this one, her style and polish. Damon, like people don't use it. Like that word is not on our show very often.
No, it does come around me.
Style and polish is not on our show very often.
Yeah.
And presenting an ability to make everyone feel comfortable is extraordinary.
My goodness, who paid you to say all that?
And here's the thing. I plucked these off of your LinkedIn profile. Damon, I know you've been on LinkedIn a long time, but I bet you a lot of folks on here probably have been on recent. A lot of these comments came from 2006. 2007, 2008. Like, this is like, Anna, like, dude, how did you, I'm like blown away by your leadership. Now you talk about the governor, you talk about mom and dad, just, and I know you're very modest, very humble, but just share, these are from 15 years ago, 10 years ago. These are not recent. You're like the Tom Brady, the Williams sisters, like long-term consistent success. How have you done it?
Well, look, I can't take the credit. So I can't take the credit for any of that. I have been absolutely blessed to have been surrounded by great people, right? So, you're only as good as your support system. And I've been blessed to have the most amazing leaders model the way for me. So if somebody thinks I'm a good leader, it's because somebody paved the way for me. And I've tried to pave the way for others that came after me. I've been around brilliant leadership. I've been around servant leadership, humble leadership, these people that led by example. And it was walking the talk as well as talking the talk, right? So, honestly, it's also the strength of the network, right? Because you don't have to have the answers, right? And God knows, like, I am smart enough to know that I'm not smart at all. But what I can do, what I can do is I know where to go to tap into the answer, right? So I've got it. I've been blessed with keeping in touch with a lot of people over the years, people who are way smarter than I am, and I just go and say, hey, I'm not afraid to go and ask the question. I need help. Do you have advice for me, or how would you go about this challenge? And that's really been the unlock for me.
Well, I appreciate your modesty, and I'm sorry. I have to read one more to you. Okay, David, you're right. I'm sorry.
Ready for it.
Few people have the opportunity to report to a manager who is also a coach and mentor, and I did when I worked for Anna McGovern. I had the pleasure of working for Anna for 2 years. She taught me the importance of strategic influencing, building relationships. I was always impressed on how she excelled in these areas. She was able to get all of her stakeholders on board with her recommendations, even people who initially had alternative ideas. That's a polite way of saying that were pushing back and resistant. She is a true leader with both knowledge and soft skills to motivate her team. I grew, and Anna, again, I love your humility and your modesty, but Damon, listen to this sentence right here. I grew tremendously during the time. I'm like just getting chills reading this. Like, what do leaders do? Leaders grow leaders. I grew tremendously during this time. We worked together, and later we both moved on to new roles at Unilever. All right, we're going to take a little pause. Let's give a little round of applause for Anna. We're just like, look at how people are speaking about you, the love, the respect, the admiration. Like, you are a force, and folks, like, what a gift to have her here to learn from Anna. But Anna, and again, I know you're being modest, mentors, friends, I know you're active with your church faith. Like, what's been the driving force for your leadership? Like, someone just starting out their career, they're young, they're looking up to someone like you. Like, boy, Anna, how did you do it?
Honestly, first of all, I want to thank you for having delved into my, LinkedIn profile the way you have, because honestly, it's been a long time since I've looked at some of these things, and I appreciate you highlighting them because, we're always the hardest on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're not supposed to talk about our faith, but faith is a huge part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about being authentic. So whether you like me or you don't, you're going to get authenticity. Sometimes, I'm a little too direct for people. Sometimes I'm not direct enough for people, but you're going to get my authentic self for the most part. I genuinely never had an ulterior motive or an agenda. I do have this Pollyannic vision of always wanting to do the right thing, and that's guided by my faith and my values. I often say, it's 75% my higher power and 25% me. I think you have a much easier burden to carry if you offload, the burdens off your shoulders. And, I had a business coach recently ask me, I had all these things going on, and he was concerned that I didn't have the wherewithal or enough bandwidth to take care of it. He's like, well, what are you going to do if all these things come to fruition? And I said, I'm going to say a couple of Our Fathers and a few Hail Marys.
Yeah.
And he's like, ha, 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 that's great. Really? What are you going to do? Like, what's your strategy?
Yeah, no, really.
Like, that's ha, ha, ha. That's really my strategy.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's my strategy. I mean, a little bit tongue in cheek, but
yeah.
One of the other things is that, you follow your gut, right? You follow your heart.
Yeah.
And if you're leading from always doing the right things, like value-based leadership, then execution becomes really second nature.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it at that. But that's, you just have to follow your gut sometimes and surround yourself with good people. So there is a bit of planning, right? Sure. There is a bit of strategy.
Right.
Surround yourself always with people who are better than you.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to have people that are better than you on the team, because they're going to pull you up rather than drag you down.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you. And again, hats off to you for what you've done and the support that you've given to your team, teammates, people under you, over you, all the above. So let's dig into supply chain. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go there. So as we said, very challenging past couple of years, but let's talk about, so, we go back to the 90s. So you've had this wonderful career. Anything that you want to share, like from either Unilever or any of your past things that really help prepare you for these deep dive challenges? Talk a little bit about, through the 90s, 2000s, as you grew as a supply chain leader, expert, what was that path? And then let's get into what it looked like during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So, I had a professor when I was going for my MBA, old school guy, right? Long since retired, but he taught us leadership and ethics, right? And so when it came to leadership, right, he basically said, any business, it doesn't matter what field you're in, there are three things you need to worry about. Okay. You need to worry about marketing, you need to worry about finance, and then you need to worry about operations, right? So those are the key unlocks. Marketing, you got to have a product and you got to know how to sell that product. Finance, because you got to know what it costs and how much money you're going to make. And operations, they are the glue that hold it all together, right? So like the concept of operations, we didn't even call it supply chain back then.
Right.
So, so really in terms of preparation, one of the blessings of having worked for, an A1 company like a Unilever or a Procter and Gamble or like a Motorola or McDonald's or Amazon. I mean, really the modern day supply chain, people might argue with me, right? But at least in terms of everyday products, right? That was created by Walmart and Procter and Gamble. All right. And Procter and Gamble was like the competitor to Unilever.
Yep.
Still are. But that was really started back in those days. But like the whole concept of supply chain dates back to the US military and logistics of World War II. But many of us are old enough to know about like Kmart and Sears and Bradley's and Caldor and all these mass merchandisers that are no longer around. Right. And that's because Walmart and Procter paired up and they started something in the late 80s, early 90s called everyday low pricing. And it was basically to do away with that bullwhip effect, of supply and demand. We're just going to create stable demand. You're going to come in, you're going to buy products, everyday low price, and we're going to plan demand, and then we're going to plan supply, and away you go. So the whole concept of how do you stabilize demand so that your supply matches? It's the old economics, right? Of, supply and demand, and how do you balance them out, and inventory optimization, and right place, right time, lowest cost option, and how do you maximize, production efficiencies and that sort of thing. And really, when you start to think about like the 90s and what was happening, Clinton was president. It was like such a major time of peace post the Iron Curtain falling, and everything was stable, and it was tremendous prosperity and the dot-com boom. And oil was at $20 a barrel.
Yeah.
Right. And so you begin to design supply chains that are, why would you have like 4 factories throughout the country or multiple sourcing points throughout North America or the region when, because oil is so cheap, you can have one mega factory, like in some kind of suburb outside of Chicago or outside of St. Louis. And, and then you can like ship to all the nodes of the country because it's $20 a barrel. Right. Well, that was the model. Okay. And then the model came along of, we can even do it cheaper if we start offshoring. All right. We can go to Mexico. So now you got the whole NAFTA thing driving the, remember Ross Perot and the big sucking sound down to Mexico. You got low labor, low manufacturing base, low costs. That was the first thing. And then we ship everything over to India, start putting service centers in Bangalore, start making things in China, right? And then you had that low cost supply chain. And really that model stuck around for the next couple of decades. It was all about low cost supply chains, right? So it was all about globalization. We're gonna design once and we're gonna deploy everywhere. It's the McDonald's approach, right? It's the Nike approach. It's the Coca-Cola approach. It's the same everywhere in the world. Minor tweaks for local regulations and that sort of thing, but that was the model. Design once, deploy everywhere, and source in China or India or low cost countries. And then and then there's always going to be black swan events, right? There's going to be natural disasters and this and that. No one ever thought of the biggest of black swan events. Yeah. Right. So COVID changed everything. Right. And that was nothing ever impacted the globe the way that did. And suddenly you realize that even the most mature supply chains had fissures all over the place. There were chinks in the armor everywhere. And what had happened is we were so low cost that we just didn't have the elasticity or the cushion to be able to absorb the major shocks that was COVID, right? This major supply disruption. We couldn't react, right? So I've been in supply chain for 33 years, right? And I'm only 29, but it was like before the boom. But so honestly, we've been trying to solve the forecasting issue my entire career. We're never going to get forecasting right. And the beauty of a plan is not the plan, because the plan is not exact, right? So the beauty of a plan is our ability to react to a plan. So it became about, how do you respond to the disruption, right? And then how do you recover from that disruption as quickly as possible? And the only way to be able to do these things is to build that agility into your supply chain. And what are the ways to do that? Right? So, the old school of thinking is that you always have to invest in inventory. Inventory covers all kinds of egregious sins. Right? That's not always the right thing, because you're never going to have the right stuff in inventory. Right. And then it's funny because during COVID, I got all kinds of family and friends who have like no idea what I do really. Like saying to me, I ordered a refrigerator and it's been 8 months and I still haven't gotten my refrigerator. Why? Like, what do I know from refrigerators? Right. I mean, it's like really funny that I was getting those kinds of questions, and I would try to explain, the various nodes of the network. But it was really that kind of disruption that started to prioritize low cost versus high resilience, right? And the cost of being off shelf, not having a product to sell, unless you're Apple, that has like significant brand loyalty. Like if you're buying an everyday consumer product, right? If you're used to buying Tide, laundry detergent, and suddenly Tide is not on the shelf, well, you're going to go and you're going to buy, you're going to buy All, or you're going to buy Pure Cooks, or whatever it is. And there's no loyalty. Like the switching costs are so low for consumers, right? Yeah. They're just going to find what's on shelf. And guess what? They may discover that buying All is a lot cheaper than buying Tide. And if they picked up Tide and they realize, geez, it cleans just as well at 40% less cost, I'm just going to keep buying All. Yeah. So at that point, what is that opportunity cost on the top line perspective to Procter & Gamble, because they just lost that Tide sale and they lost a loyal consumer to a lower cost product? And if you remember during COVID, you always found Tide. You always found Bounty paper towels. You always found Charmin, for the most part. For the most part. Like the toilet, paper crisis, You always could find Charmin, which was like double the cost of everything else, but it was on shelf, right? Because those are mature supply chains. They are the best of the best. And they understand that connectivity of top line to bottom line. Everybody thinks supply chain is about bottom line cost, right? Reduce your cost so you can maximize your profit. Nobody ever equates it to driving the top line, right? So I think that's the biggest lesson that we learned in COVID. And where I'm getting my opportunities now that I'm an independent, and I don't like to say I'm a consultant. I am an independent supply chain practitioner who has the hands-on experience, who can fill the void, because what's happened, the other thing is you've got the talent gap. So all of this stuff, leadership, supply chain, talent management, it's all interconnected, right? So people are leaving the workforce in droves, and they still continue to. Lots of baby boomers have retired. And so we, believe it or not, whether you're a small company, whether you're a large company, a mature business, an immature business, whether you're a startup, I am shocked by the low level of maturity or unpreparedness, business unpreparedness in many of these companies. And so we haven't systemized things. So we rely on a lot of tribal knowledge. Okay. So, Anna's been practicing and doing this for us for the last 25 years. We don't have to worry. Well, now Anna suddenly wants to retire. Right. And all that knowledge goes out the door with me. So how do you systemize what's in my head? And that's the trick for supply chain leaders, but leadership of any kind, whether you're a marketing leader, a sales leader, a finance leader. HR is going to become the new seat at the table, right? I mean, we do have them at the table, but before it's like, oh, well, supply chain is now sitting at the table. Procurement is now sitting at the table. The next round of CEOs is going to come out of the HR function, because at the end of the day, no matter what we make, it's about people, right? It's about people. Take care of your employees and they'll take care of your business. So I'll stop to see if you have any questions for me.
Well, don't you think, Curt, we just need to take a moment of silence?
Okay, let's that was and I think Matt Goosey had he dropped a line about so hey, happy Friday to everybody out there. I think
we got Katie, and Matt. Matt, give me a bad time. Yes, the Seahawks are going to have a tough year this year, much tougher than the Green Bay Packers. I will give you that right now. David, hey David, how you doing today?
Oh, this was just a massive. This was just absolutely captivating. Just absolutely phenomenal. And what I'm going to digress possibly here. It's the 9/11 anniversary coming up on Sunday. Gosh, 21 years ago already. Wow. 2008 was, so we had the tragedy of 9/11. We've had 2008. So totally dumb, ignorant question on my part. Any of these, like you talked about, like, the nine, and I love history, and I was a logistics major in college 100 years ago. So I love where you're going here. And, Sam Walton, how he just completely disrupted things. Yeah. I love how you took us from the 90s, 2000s up to COVID. And you talk about, okay, like everything's great when everything's as planned on the script, but then all of a sudden something happens. Were there any, so I'm packaging a question here. Were there any rumblings from 9/11? Was there anything from 2008 with the market, collapsing, what have you, where there were like, hey, we do have kinks in the armor. We do have some challenges, that there were red flags coming up to what we saw in 2020, or anything that you want to share there from 2001, 2008 up until COVID? Anything? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's always going to be these kinds of disruptions. 2008, 2011 just took away our innocence, right? And there was a country in mourning, and I just remember I was literally getting ready to fly that morning.
Were you?
Yeah. Jefferson City, Missouri, and suddenly I'm not going anywhere. right?
Yeah.
Because every airport just shut down. But we literally, I think about that time, we were allowed to mourn. Like nobody worked, right? We showed up to work, but nobody worked. We had about a week where no one did anything. We just kind of like were lethargic. We're sitting at the coffee bars watching TV.
We're zombies, right?
Yeah, we were zombies, and we had to give grace to people. And the country just sort of stopped. But then, you know, the American in us kicked back in and we're like, okay, we got to get back to it. Otherwise we'll have been defeated. 2008, the financial meltdown and the drying up of capital, and it's all business, right? So it's all interconnected. Suddenly, you know, there's no money to borrow, so there's no money to invest in infrastructure, in factories, in projects. You had massive layoffs. It didn't just impact the finance industry. It impacted everybody because suddenly no one wants to invest. Everyone wants to hold on to their capital because we just don't know. It was such a meltdown that it was complete gridlock, right? And everybody wants to hoard their cash, right? Nobody wants to invest in business. So that's a major disruption. And that was very global. But it was short-lived, right? It was short-lived. And think about the supply chain, right? I remember, like, I don't even know what it is anymore. But like, I remember there was a statistic, and this is going back maybe 20 years, but like think about the auto industry, right? And, you know, GM and Chrysler going bankrupt and we bailed, you know, the government, you know, too big to fail. Do you remember that whole concept in 2018? I think there's something like 1 out of 6 jobs in our economy is directly tied to the auto industry, right? So this is why, you know, this concept of too big to fail, you got to bail out these guys because otherwise you're going to completely collapse your economy, right? I think it's probably even like more dependent, right? So it's, again, think about it. It's the extended network of the supply chain. So 9/11, I wouldn't say, and I can't believe it's like 21 years, but I wouldn't say that was a long-term issue. Okay. And certainly 2008 was a bigger issue because that was also global. But then you had this like epidemic pandemic that just does not go away. And it has fundamentally shifted everything in the way that we do, the way we go to work, the way we dress for work, the way we live, our values, we're just going to leave the workforce entirely. And that, I think we're still trying to figure out what is the true fallout from that, right? What is the true fallout? I think, supply chain digitization. I can't stand when I misstate words, but people throw that around and it's very loose, right? Digital is a tool, right? At the end of the day, it's not a panacea. You can throw you could put me in a boat right now and it's going to get me, across the sound faster than trying to go around, an island and go away. Oh, this is good. But I don't know how to drive a boat, right? I don't know. So yeah, that might be a way for me to get from point A to point B without having to go all the way around. But if I don't know how to drive a boat, it does me no good. So unless you are focusing on people and process, okay, technology is useless, right? And so many people want to solve technology issues when they have people and process issues, or they want to throw technology at it. And you need to invest and take the time. I've never seen where 3 women can deliver a baby at 3 months. Right? I mean, it's just never happened, right? You got to take the time, and it's got to be 1 woman at a time taking the baby full term. So you got to do this. And digital is very important because it gives you the ability to process large amounts of data in real time very, very quickly. And that is the unlock to the new supply chain, right? That is the unlock. It really is about the network nodes. You can't toss it over the wall. It's got to be an interconnected network, right? It's sort of like the whole blockchain and the whole, crypto and all of the nodes that you see. I don't know much about it, so I'll stop right there with that. But it's got to be an ability to read where it is. So you got to have like this control tower view. Like think of an airline control tower. And now we've got supply chain control towers. And it is in real time able to show you where things are going to be, right? It's going to, where is my inventory? It's on a ship somewhere in the Atlantic, and we think it's going to get here in 3 days. And maybe it'll give me time to figure out how many porters I need. Once it arrives at the dock, how many porters can I plan for? What do I need to do? But it is about collaborative partnerships. And then it brings me back to, it's not about people, it's not about systems. It's all about people and relationships and that connectivity. So the tighter we can collaborate with our customers and our suppliers, the more resilient our supply chain is going to be. You can't do it without them. And that's what I try to teach, right? That is my evangelism. It's all about interconnected, collaborative relationships. And that's what's going to take the waste out of the supply chain, and that's what's going to drive the value.
Yep. Just have to sit back for a minute and think about that one again.
It's all about the relationship. So Anna, since it's lunchtime, what we do is when you're just dropping, when you're providing a master class and we're just we just like to savor and just enjoy, just relish and cherish what you've just shared with us. So, and maybe you've kind of answered this, any new opportunities, kind of, your boots in the street, you're out there working with folks side by side, any new opportunities, trends, things, and as you just said, all about those relationships, any other new opportunities that you're seeing for folks?
Yeah. It's really interesting because during COVID, it was really all about, supply chain, or rather procurement is finally the bride. Okay. So, procurement is no longer the bridesmaid. It's the bride. They were sitting at the table. Right. And it's like, people were beat up. So it's like, how do I work with my suppliers? How do I squeeze my suppliers? Or how do I enable my suppliers? How do I become a supplier or a customer of choice? Because it's not about squeezing. It's not about, I'm going to beat you up for the best price. Because guess what? Suppliers all of a sudden had all the power and they were firing customers. Mm-hmm. So it really became, how do I become a customer of choice? And of course, it was about inflation containment, right? Costs are skyrocketing. Demand was far outstripping supply. So now I've got the ability to generate price. Customers and companies were passing price on to their customer base, and it was hitting all of us on the consumer level. And now it's kind of like, well, that was reactive. And now what I'm seeing is people are starting to realize the importance of planning, right? The importance of supply chain planning and management. And it's funny because most of the queries that I'm getting now are from, small companies, medium-sized companies, large companies. It doesn't matter. It's not discriminating. It's every size, every industry. It's really funny because like my wheelhouse is consumer packaged goods. It's food and beverage. It's beauty. That is my wheelhouse. I'm now in like oil and gas, and I'm in agricultural equipment, and I'm in like, heavy earth moving equipment, and all these industries I don't know much about, but people are inquiring because they're like, we need to look at our planning processes. We need to look at a sales and operations planning. We need to assess how to effectively manage our production. We've got way too many gyrations. We've got way too many fluctuations in demand. And I'm sitting on a ton of inventory. When you're in an inflationary period and cash is tight, cash is king. and everyone wants to figure out how to how to generate better cash flow. Margins have been terribly squeezed, right? Sales are not as robust as we think, right? And so people want to reduce their cost, and they're trying to figure out how. And suddenly they realize, I need to look at my planning because I am inefficient. And suddenly inventory management and optimization, and how do I release cash from inventory, and how do I have the right inventory levels, and how do I look at what we call multi-echelon inventory. So in other words, if you're building cars, you don't want to carry, a bunch of, Hondas. You don't want to carry a bunch of, Honda Accords in inventory. You want to look at the various stages of raws and, like the parts, and where is the lowest cost opportunity to carry inventory, because you want to carry as low an inventory level as possible. But at the same time, you want to be able to react, right? You want to be able to react. So if I need to make a bunch of blue Accords, the touring version, I don't know, I'm making it up. You've got a big spike in demand, where is it best that you can react? And then the other thing is, we never like to talk about this, but not all customers are created equal, right? People really need to do that big time analysis. You're not gonna treat mom and pop, dealership, the way you would a CarMax. I'm making it up because I'm on that auto industry. You really have to have the right segmentation of your supply base, and you need to work your way back, right? You need to work your way backwards. So it's like, what are your top customers by? You need to look at a revenue model, and you need to look at what drives the majority. So if you do the 80-20 rule, what is driving 80% of your revenue? And then you need to map that out if you are a discrete manufacturer. So if you are a manufacturer of goods and services, or rather goods, then you need to map out that product line to make sure you are protecting that revenue base. If you offer services, do you have the right talent? Do you have the bench strength? How are you recruiting, and how are you attracting, retaining, and training your talent? Right. So that's all tied into it. But that's kind of how you have to look at that interconnected supply chain.
Yep. Well, and yeah. Again, we should just take a moment.
I'm just taking notes here. I love
exactly.
Let's recap on a couple of things. We've talked about heavy communication, aligning with your vendors, your partners. The 80-20 rule, not treating all customers the same. I just fantastic tips. Anna, as you're talking about, we've talked before when you and I talked previously, Dame and I, we work with a lot of small manufacturers, maybe 30, 40, 50 employees. And obviously those folks have been hit really hard.
Yes.
They don't have the team. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the man or woman power to maybe flow or put the resources in that the publicly traded companies do. What are you seeing with small manufacturers, or any tips, advice, strategies for the smaller folks out there that are man, Anna, I'm really struggling out here. Any advice for those folks?
Yeah. You know what? Every state has a manufacturing enterprise partner that's aligned with the Department of Commerce, right? So I had the honor of just sitting on the board of the Connecticut MEP called Constep. And every state has this version, right? So this is a joint investment opportunity, and small and medium-sized manufacturers have the ability to tap into these resources, right? So, I'll just use my MEP, right? So Constep in the state of Connecticut is funded, 50% by the Department of Labor. The rest of it comes from funding from the state and from fees that are collected from the clients, right? And these clients are typically small and medium-sized manufacturers who need that resource. And these companies have the skill base, right? They've got the consulting, resources that you can tap into to help you solve some of these issues, right? They can connect you. And I think it's really important. And that's what a lot of, state governments have been doing in the last couple of years, is how do we equip, right? So you had the CARES Act, you had the American Rescue Act, and the federal government has made significant investments into trying to prop up, all our manufacturers, right? So even things like, we've got family owned businesses that have been around 40, 50 years. Suddenly mom and dad want to retire and junior doesn't want to take over the business. Right. And what happens in that situation, right? And Damon, this is where you come in.
Yep.
When junior doesn't want the business that mom and dad put their whole life into, and yet they employ 75 people, and therefore they've got responsibility for 75 families out there. What do you do with a business like that? You can't let it shut down. So you've got people like Damon, right? You got these resources in the MEPs that exist that help you to find caretakers or people who can acquire these businesses, but and they help you to reduce your costs or to maximize your revenue or to streamline your operation. And I think it's really important to join up with your local chambers and your local resources and your nonprofits, that are out there to help businesses remain solid and strong. And I can tell you, in the state of Connecticut, two things are top of mind: supply chain and talent. Right. And I bet you that would go for many of the 50 states, right? How do I create low cost supply chains? How do I create that material availability? How do I create, opportunities where I'm not disrupted? And how do I attract the right talent? In the state of Connecticut, I've got 110,000 open jobs and 77,000 candidates to fill them. So anybody wants to move, you've got opportunities. Right. So, but that's what these MEPs are here to do. And I'm really honored to be a part of, being on a board that can drive some of this agenda.
Absolutely. And what an absolute, as you just said, what an honor, what a privilege. And again, as we kicked off the program, no surprise whatsoever with your leadership, your expertise, your passion, that Constep would reach out. And again, folks, if you're out there, whatever state you're in, as Anna just described, the manufacturing extension partnerships, MEPs, there's one in all 50 states. Incredible, wonderful resource. Damon, we interviewed quite a few folks. As a matter of fact, I think we have three MEPs are on the program this month coming up. So we have New Jersey, Alaska, and Kansas. So we're all over the country. Yeah. And I have the honor and privilege. I'm going to the annual MEP conference in Chicago, the 18th. And so we're going to have a good time hanging out with folks at the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So, Anna, we could chat with you, keep you all day. I know that you are super busy flying your cape as a supply chain evangelist and superhero. Yeah. So let's wind down. You do a lot of work volunteering your community. I know you do a lot of other board work. You just mentioned that you are now on the board of Constep. Can you just share, what's going on in your community and what's going on with, how do you find time? Like, you're doing all this other great work. How do you find time to be involved with your community and your volunteering work?
Well, it's really interesting. The more I give, the more I seem to get back. I can't turn it around. Look, it's really important. First of all, like I said, the more I give, the more I seem to get. So it's always me. It's a lopsided scenario, right? I think it's important to give back to your community. And so I try to do it. And the way I've joined up the community and my volunteer efforts have to do with either my values or supporting our kids. So I was like on the youth orchestra when my son was, in the youth orchestra, and he made it to a national level, one of two kids from the state. When my kids were playing Little League, and, then my older son, became captain of the baseball team eventually, through high school. And then, in my church, I get sucked in and I just don't know how to say no. So I've ran religious education, ran the parish council, that kind of stuff. So I do it and I try to balance, and every once in a while I've got to prioritize. So little by little, I let something go, something else comes on, and it's all about balance, but you've got to give back. It's got to be part of the agenda. That's the way I look at it.
Well, that is so amazing.
Awesome.
You're such an inspiration, and guy. And how can? Well, I want to give one shout out. Both your kids are at UConn, I believe, right? So
yeah, Huskies, go Huskies,
go Huskies. So
little basketball there.
Proud, good basketball, decent football. So actually, I met the football coach last year at UConn.
Yeah.
So great guy. He's not there anymore. But so as we wind down, I just want to give a shout out. Thank you. How can everybody? Obviously, anybody catching you here on LinkedIn, if they're catching you live, or I'm sorry, on a replay later on, maybe on YouTube. How can folks connect with you, and how can they find you to help them with supply chain challenges?
Yes. So certainly reach out via LinkedIn, or, Instagram or Twitter. I'm on all of it. Pondviewconsulting.com. You can go to my website. You can, go to my LinkedIn business page, pondviewconsulting.com. Best way is really through LinkedIn or through my website, I would say. Look forward to hearing from whoever wants to discuss supply chain.
Awesome. All right. So, hey, I want to give a shout out, huge thank you to everybody that's joined us today. We deeply appreciate you more than you know. Boy, this is just such a privilege for Damon and I to hang out here every Friday and just to learn and listen and just relish and just absorb all this brilliance that you shared with us. Anna, thank you. Thank you. God bless you for what you do for your community. Thank you for what you do for supply chain. You are all over the place on LinkedIn. You're just, your enthusiasm is just so contagious. Your positivity is just love every single one, bit of it. Thank you for taking your time to hang out with Damon and I today. It's such a privilege. And everybody, you know what? On Sunday at 46, I think was, and 9:03. Let's give a little moment of silence for 9/11. Can't believe it's been 21 years. But thank you to everybody for what you guys do. Damon, why don't you take us away, dude? Take us out.
Wow. This was awesome today. I'm going to tell you, I was taking, as Curt was saying, I was taking notes today, listening to Anna speak about maximizing opportunities with the supply chain. I go back to a few things real quickly before we wrap up. Go back and listen to this, because she talked about a couple things that are key. You're missing out on top line opportunity when your supply chain isn't working right. That just hit me hard. There was a couple things there. And then another thing Anna talked about several times in here was people and process. Make sure you systematize your processes first, then make sure your people understand, then look at the technology to support those processes and work through them, like she was saying in there. But it's just some great stuff. Just thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. Go back and listen to this stuff. Listen to Anna talk, reach out to her and ask her some supply chain questions. But thanks, everyone, for being here today. We'll be back again next week with another manufacturing e-commerce success, having fun and talking about some manufacturing e-commerce success topics. Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.